Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you are watching this broadcast. At the present moment, it is Monday night at 8 o'clock, and I am super excited to be here for another edition of the BGC Book Club. With it's going to be our last book for the year, so it's especially exciting to end the year on the bang with someone who I found out is my homegirl. So I'm super duper excited. So welcome to the BGC Book Club. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Marcy Thomas, and I'm the founder of Brown Girl Collective, which has been around since about 2009, and the BGC Book Club, which I started during the pandemic in April of last year. So over the course of the last year and a half, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of wonderful Black women writers across genres, and tonight is not going to be any different. So as you're joining the room, please let us know where you're joining us from, just so we can kind of know who all is here. And without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and get started and tell you a little bit about tonight's book and author, Her Little Secrets, Wanda M. Morris. So Wanda Morris is an alumna of the Yale Writers Workshop and Robert McKee's Story Seminar. She is a member of Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. As a corporate attorney, she has worked in the legal departments of several Fortune 100 companies. An accomplished presenter and leader, Morris has previously served as president of the Georgia chapter of the Association of Corporate Counsel and is the founder of its Women's Initiative, an empowerment program for female in-house lawyers. A native of my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio, Wanda is a married mother of 3 and lives in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I am as well, so we have lots in common. All Her Little Secrets is her debut novel. So without any further delay, welcome to the room. Welcome to the stage, Wanda M. Morris.
Hey, Marcy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. I mean, I was excited to read the book, and anyway, and then the more, as I told you, me being nosy and finding out we're from the same hometown, that made it even more exciting for me. So.
Exactly.
Yes. Buckeyes in the Peach State. So, all right, we've already got one comment. She loved this book. So, yes, Anissa says she loved the book. So, awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's Anissa. Hi, Anissa. That's my buddy. That's my online buddy.
Thank you. All right. That's awesome. So, Wanda, I just want to congratulate you on your new book. I mean, it's been out for a little over a month now. How does that feel?
Oh gosh, it still feels surreal. I go from like this fugue state of disbelief to like these euphoric highs, and it's a wonderful feeling. It took a long time to get here on this publication journey, so I'm excited.
Absolutely. And we are excited for you. As I mentioned, I read the book. I read it really quickly. And as I was looking at some of the things that other people were saying, they said the same thing, pick it up, can't put it down, because it's like, what's going to happen next? So one of the things, of course, for those of you who don't know, this book is about a young lady who is a attorney for an organization, not at a law firm, but working for a business. And there are a lot of different things that are going on with her where all her little secrets come in. So, of course, Wanda, with you having experience in the legal system, what was it that made you decide to write this type of book, like a legal thriller, pretty much?
It's a great question. Actually, I set out to write about the experience of living as a Black woman in America, in corporate America. I placed the setting of the book within the context of like a legal department within an organization, because I wanted to be intentional about the types of dilemma that Ellice Littlejohn would face. So, if you've read the book, you know that she is kind of caught in this quagmire because she has to either protect her biological family, um, or she risked her career by exposing secrets as a lawyer, which she is ethically bound to hold as part of this corporate family. And so I wanted her to be a lawyer because I needed to set up these ethical boundaries that she would be in, and kind of the dilemma that she would face if she had this tough choice to make. I often say I didn't really set out to write a legal thriller. I
Mhm.
really want to write women's stories, and that's what I kind of consider this book to be. It's a story about family, it's a story about love and loss and resilience. It just happens to take place within the context of a corporate legal setting.
Absolutely. And one of the things we kind of talked about prior to coming on is that, my day job, I work in a corporate setting. And there are just a lot of things that I feel like, as a Black woman and a Black woman's experience, that there are a lot of things that we deal with in corporate America. And
Yep.
Elise, is dealing with a lot of these things. Of course,
Mhm.
there are things that are specific to the fact that she is an attorney, but there were so many things that I could relate to. Even if it's something as simple as the hair, like you've got your curly hair, I've got my faux locks in. You know, being in a corporate environment as a Black woman and sometimes feeling like we can't show up as our authentic selves.
Exactly. And that was, kind of part of her journey, her arc through the story too, is that for anybody who hasn't read the book yet, it's a story of, this Black female lawyer who comes from this past that she has tried very hard to put behind her. And so, she goes on to, um, boarding school and then college and, an Ivy League law degree, all in this effort to kind of recreate herself. And it is only when she is placed in this dilemma within this company that, part of her story is really kind of, who really am I when I'm living in these dual, worlds, as a sister and a daughter, a Black woman just living my life, and then, a Black woman in this corporate setting. And so part of her arc is finally coming to realize how she can be her authentic self, which I think it's still tough for Black women. I think it's tough for women too, depending on your circumstances, whether you're Black, white, or otherwise. It's tough to work in these predominantly white male dominated spaces.
Absolutely. And the fact that you mentioned that, because there is another character in the book who is a Caucasian female who is also dealing with different things,
Exactly.
so it definitely is a woman thing. It can be a woman thing. And then, of course, when you add race along with gender,
Mhm.
it just can take it to a whole nother level. There are just, wow, there's just so many different things that I could just tap into. But one of the things that I thought about a lot, because this story does take place in Atlanta, where we
Mhm.
both currently reside. And, when people think of Atlanta, and the Black experience, they think, oh, Atlanta's a Black city, a Black mayor, all these wonderful, this Black culture, all these Black businesses, all of these wonderful things. But to understand that even though we're in Atlanta, there still can be some things going on that don't necessarily celebrate us and our culture. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a part of Elise's journey as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is, like you say, I think there's this. kind of, you know, misconception that because the city is a city with, you know, a very heavy presence of Black people, a Black mayor, a lot of Black people in government and leadership roles, that, you know, certainly we would not have all of, you know, these issues that you might see in some place that has a lesser population of Blacks. But in fact, Atlanta is a city of dichotomies. And so I thought the city was the perfect place to explore that very myth when you have, you know, Confederate statues and, you know, Confederate soldiers carved into the side of a mountain right down the road from John Lewis Parkway, or,
Right.
you know, these statues that sit right down the street from the Ebenezer Baptist Church where Dr. King preached. And in fact, you do have a prevalence of, you know, Black people in the city. You don't really see a high presence of Blacks in the executive suites and places of power. Um, and you know, it's interesting because I was reading, I think it was Fortune or Forbes magazine, I can't remember which one, a few months ago, and the article talked about how there is only 3% of Black executives in the executive suite of Fortune 500 companies. Now, think of
Wow.
all the companies and all the executive suites that you have. That is a really, really low number. Um, and so my hope is that, you know, by exploring this, of course, I do it within the context of, you know, a murder mystery, but I do that for other reasons that we can talk about later. But still, I wanted to address that issue specifically so that we can have a dialogue, even in this, what they call, you know, post-racial Obama, you know, country. You know, over the last 4 or 5 years, we have had a government and an administration that seeks to denigrate and certainly to minimize any progress that Blacks and people of color have made in this country. So my hope is that this book will at least spark some discussion. We'll say, you know, gosh, are we still here? Are we still dealing with these issues? The short answer is yes.
Yes.
Let's have a discussion about what we can do about it,
Mm.
so that we don't lose the progress that we've made thus far.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the story really kicks right in with Wanda, something happening. As we said, it is a murder mystery. And Wanda M, Ellice, you know, up into a situation, you know, immediately where she has to start making decisions because of secrets. And it's past and present secrets, really, that
Mhm.
she has to, you know, make some decisions surrounding that. And I just find it interesting in the story that I don't do spoilers, and we already said that. Those of you who haven't watched before, we don't do spoilers. So, but it's
Good.
very interesting that, you know, as Ellice is thrust into a situation immediately, that she has to, instead of maybe doing the right thing
Mhm.
based upon what's going on with the murder. If she
Mhm.
happens upon the murder, that's not giving anything away.
Yeah, it's not a
You know,
spoil. That's on page 2 of the book.
right, exactly. So she immediately has to think: do I do the right thing in telling the story, or do I or letting people know what's going on, or do I do the right thing in terms of making sure that I'm protected as this Black woman in this environment? And
Mhm.
I thought, wow, you know, how often do we have to do that?
Mhm. Mhm.
Do we call the police when something happens? Or do we try to make sure we
Exactly.
got a good alibi before we call the police?
Exactly. You know, I was intentional about that opening scene. And interestingly enough, over the many years that it took me to write this book, there were two scenes in the book that never changed through all my edits and revisions. And that opening scene is one of them. I was very intentional about that because what I was trying to demonstrate through Elise's actions is that trauma affects people differently. And,
Mhm.
as you read the book, you come to discover that, all these dark secrets that she has, some of them were very traumatic. And trauma has a way of making people behave in ways that, many of us would think that just seems illogical.
Mhm.
I also wanted to capture what you just said, that she stands there and she tries to decide, do I get the police involved? What does that mean for me? Because everybody's experience with law enforcement is not the same. And
Right.
certainly when it comes to Black and Brown people. And so, because of what she has gone through and what her childhood was like, she really did have a dilemma when she walked into that executive suite and she was faced with, what do I do next? Because I don't think it's a spoiler to say, like I said, in the very first chapter, she goes to the executive suite for a meeting with her boss and she finds him dead.
Mhm.
And, other people would think it illogical, unthinkable not to call the police. Why don't you just pick up the phone right away and call the
Right.
police? But she has had some things in her background that make her pause. Because, like I said, her experience with law enforcement has been very different. And like I said, that's the case for many Black and Brown people.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other themes, of course, we have the present day in the story, in Elisa's story, where we're talking about what happens with her murdered boss and what's going on within the company. We'll kind of circle back around to that in a minute because it's really like you're telling two stories at the same time. You're
Mhm.
telling the story of what's happening in the here and now, but then you're also telling the story of how became Ellice Littlejohn
Right.
attorney, what she experienced, the life that she led prior
Mhm.
to in Chillicothe, Georgia, which
Mhm.
we're both from Ohio. Like, oh yeah, Chillicothe, Ohio. You mentioned that in the book. Most people think of Ohio and they think of Chillicothe.
Right.
So yeah, that's true. But it goes back, to kind of tell the trajectory of how she got to be where she is, and as you said,
Mhm.
that trauma that she experienced. One of the things in that is a dysfunctional family
Right.
situation for her, and some things that happen along that line, but also in the midst of all of that dysfunction, she also finds the support of someone, Ms. Vera,
Mhm.
who becomes like a surrogate person in her life to kind of help her and guide her, and we see how that story plays out over time. How important was it, or what was kind of the process behind giving, even though she has this traumatic life or some things that are going on, how important was it for you to include someone who kind of stepped in and gave her a sense of grounding and family?
Yeah. Yeah. It was very important because I think that Miss Vera represents another faction of, Black womanhood. Those
Mhm.
women who step in the gap and, they love us and they support us, even though they didn't give birth to us.
Right.
And I did not want this story to be another kind of, you know, survival through Black trauma story. I
Mhm.
wanted to create a story that was realistic in its efforts to say what women go through, but also was realistic in not only the bad parts, but the good parts.
Mhm.
And, you raised from Cleveland, so
Mhm.
you know this. In the neighborhood I grew up, we just also discovered we grew up not too far from each
Right.
other too. And in those neighborhoods, if you were doing something out in the street you weren't supposed to, and your parents weren't home, if Miss Smith down the street or across the street got wind of it, she was going to tell your parents, or she
Right.
was going to discipline you herself.
Right.
Everybody in the neighborhood was watching out for everybody else's kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted Vera to serve as that kind of guiding beacon, because you know in the midst of this pain that this young girl is going through, there is still hope. Like I said, I wanted the book to represent, despite all of the bad things that are going on, that there's always hope, that there's always a chance. And so Vera was a very intentional character. She was a character that she's kind of like an amalgam of my mom and my grandmom and aunts who stepped in and took people under their wing. I know as I was growing up, we always had some cousin or some friend or somebody who was staying with us until they could get back on their feet and they
Mm-hmm.
could move
Mm-hmm.
on. Because my mom was she was just made like that. You didn't leave anybody behind. And so that's what I was trying to represent in Miss V, or Aunt Vera, as they called her too.
Absolutely. And we have Aunt Vera, and then we also have Sam, who is Elise's brother. And there were so many things about her relationship with him that I also see that rings true, especially when you have a family where there are traumatic things going on, that sometimes that older child or one of the children, in this
Mhm.
case at least is the older, they take on this responsibility of feeling
Right.
like they have to take care of their sibling or their siblings. And this is something, also a theme that ran through, that continued
Mhm.
throughout the entire story, where she's always
Right.
looking out for her brother. um that's just something that we see a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love Sam. I adore Sam.
Mhm.
For me, Sam was there not only to demonstrate Elise's passion and commitment to her family, like, she too stepped in the gap and helped Sam as they were going through all this pain. But I also wanted him to serve as a sort of a statement on, what the legal system and the judicial system can do to Black and brown people as well. I mean, Elise had the benefit of, getting the scholarship and going off to college. Sam did not have those opportunities. And as a result, he was caught up in this, cycle and trajectory of his life that, he did not fare as well as Elise. And I think she always felt, some responsibility. Um, Although I think the responsibility lies, at the foot of, a judicial system that still prosecutes and convicts Black and brown people at much higher rates than
Mhm.
whites. So that was important for me to include in this story as well.
Right, and that's something Anissa is saying, how she loved him as well. He wanted to do the right thing, but being pulled in too many directions. Absolutely, and I
Mhm.
believe that that's something that is real. For those individuals who may have been caught up in the system, sometimes it's circumstantial. That
Right.
they wind up there and end up with long sentences, and or being
Mhm.
on probation. All these different things that can occur, and that no matter what they try to do to be on the right path or the right page, it can oftentimes be difficult in that. But then also just thinking about Elise again, of course she felt a commitment to her brother as her brother. And
Mhm.
I also think about how sometimes, how can I put it, people take on the burden of that,
Mhm.
understanding that sometimes, in this case, he was trying to do the right things.
Right.
Sometimes that's not the case, but though the person who was able to move on or live a different lifestyle sometimes may feel a little guilt, or
Yeah,
feel, feel a certain way about that.
yeah, exactly. And I think America likes to, likes to tell this story of, this is a country where you can, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and, make yourself new. And that's
Mhm.
not always the case for
Right.
everyone. And, to your point, when, you get caught in circumstances or things like that, sometimes you are not the beneficiary of, being able to just, get up, dust yourself off again. A lot of people get the benefit of the doubt and are able to do that. A lot of people are not.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as of course, as this is a parallel story,
Mhm.
that's kind of a bit about what's going on with her family and the people that play a part throughout the story. But one of the things that, back to what's going on in her business, in the company, Houghton, is it Houghton? Am I saying it correct?
Often,
Houghton.
often.
Yes.
Mhm.
Wow. That's all I can say about that. I mean, there's so many things because, of course, as she, Elise, she walks into the murder, then of her boss, and she winds up getting a promotion. That's not really giving
Mhm.
too much away. And it's like, wow, she gets this promotion. And the thing that crosses my mind is we know that there are ulterior motives why they gave her the promotion. But I also think of that sometimes, and this kind of speaks back to what we were talking about earlier about, like, say, Black women or Black people in a workplace, that
Mhm.
sometimes a person, they may give you the position, but they give you the position with a stipulation that you just toe the line.
Mhm.
you don't
Exactly.
you don't say too much, you don't do too much, because really you should be grateful that we gave you this position. That was something that kept playing in the back of my mind. It's like,
Mhm.
wow. I mean, of course we know that there's some other things, all her little secrets, that they were using to try to keep her in line. But then I thought, just in general, that can happen.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting too because when you're in situations like that, you I think you're torn because, as I try to explain with Elise, she's thinking, gosh, I will take this position. Although she's not stupid. She knows, yeah, they're trying to pacify and, check off their diversity box.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe by being in this role and being in this white space, I can open minds, I can change minds, I can help somebody else come along. I can help the company bring in more, people of color. Um, and then, it's like she says, okay, I'll do this. This will be a good thing. And then still, she goes to, the cocktail parties where she's somewhat shunned, and, she's in the executive suite where all sorts of, wild microaggressions go on. And you stop and you think, how can I help the next person when I'm sitting in here and I'm getting, treated this way?
Right.
Again, another experience that I think, Black women go through, fully entitled to say, hey, wait a freaking minute. But
Mm-hmm.
again, we are still stilted because we are still, of the mindset that, I do need to be in here. I do need to toe the line, whatever else. I don't think it's a spoiler to say, one of the things she does in the executive suite is, she constantly straightens her hair. even though she wants to wear it, she looks at other women who wear locks and, twist outs and things like that with the thought, gosh, I want to be me. But she knows that that is not well received in this office space where she works. Again, more of that kind of otherness that we sometimes experience in these spaces.
Absolutely. And, just the whole thing of her, going in, the company is going through some changes right out at this point anyway, because there are people who are saying you don't have enough Black representation or minority, or I hate the word minority because we're not minor, but you don't have enough diversity in this place. And they'll, okay, I'm here, I can help. And she's trying to do that. And, people are saying things, but they really don't mean it because there is an ulterior motive. There are some other things going on beneath the scenes.
Yeah. It's I tried to speak to, of course this is all fiction,
right,
but I tried to address within the context of a fictional book that which is very realistic for a lot of people who work in these corporate environments. And in doing that, my hope is that, people kind of step back and go, I never thought about it that way. Or, I've had some people tell me, I've worked in, corporate America for 25 years. And I've always made this kind of joke. And I never thought that it would have that kind of impact or that it cut that way when I made it. And the thought is, yeah, it does. It really does. And, my hope is that even though it's in the context of fiction and a murder mystery, that there is some bite of realism that makes people stop and think that, am I an ally? Am I helping the situation, or I'm not helping the situation? That's my hope.
Yes, and wow, I'm just thinking the company and some of the executives in the company, they definitely they have a motive towards making money, of course, because when they're in business to make money, and there are things that they're doing that they shouldn't do in order to bring in more money. That's one piece. But then there is also, speaking to the diversity piece, they also really don't want diversity,
right?
And are have a secret society.
Yeah, change is hard. Change is hard for anybody. And I'll give people that. I understand that the world is evolving, and it's a different sort these days. But be part of the change. I'm not saying that everybody's got to embrace everybody else and sing kumbaya, but at least don't hurt or exacerbate the situation.
Right.
And I don't think that the executives in this particular company got that playbook.
Right. They're definite, and but really, it speaks to a lot of things that we are seeing, and that's why one of the things I loved about the book. I mean, of course, we know it's a murder mystery, but just the things that are going on, and just thinking about the fact that we do have people who are trying so hard to hold on to what was, and keeping things in a certain way, and will go to by any means necessary, to paraphrase Malcolm X, to hold on even at the expense of hurting others, or being very intentional about keeping others out, and maintaining the purity of what it is that they want to see. And that's like, wow, I couldn't help but think in my mind, I know this is fiction, but I bet you there really are.
I got that comment too. And you know what, given given this political and cultural environment that we're in to um, sometimes life can be stranger than fiction.
Mm-hmm.
You just never
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah.
Right, because well, I mentioned it. I'm not going to say too much because, but yes, I have been experienced being in places where it's like, wow, everybody that comes in here kind of looks the same.
Yeah.
I don't see people that look, this certain way. I don't see people who look like
Right.
me or
Or yeah, at least when she goes to a cocktail party for work, she does that kind of thing that many of us do, where you look around the room to count how many other, Black and brown people, how many other women, that whole thing. I feel pretty certain that my white male colleagues do not do that when they walk into a
mm,
room.
mm-mm,
They do not. Um,
mm-mm.
and again, I'm trying to bring in some of that realism that we all kind of go through when
Mm-mm.
we are in these sorts of spaces.
Oh, another sidebar, because you talk about this cocktail party. It takes place in Savannah. I don't know if I mentioned to you that I lived in the Savannah area for like 10 years or 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mom is from that area. And
Uh-huh.
so, like, when you were talking about Savannah and going into, certain places and looking around, and like the only other Black people you see are the people that work there, I'm like,
Yeah.
get on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spot on.
Again, fiction mirroring reality.
Right, right. That's one of the reasons I do love Atlanta, because that's not the case
Yeah.
here. But just moving forward, of course, Ellice is our hero in the story, and there are just a lot of different things that transpire with her and her family, and trying to continue to not only protect herself but also to protect her family,
Mhm.
and her adopted aunt slash mother V, and her brother Sam. There is something that happens with Sam. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but it is something that forces her at least to have to go back home at a certain
Mhm.
point. And there was something that you wanted to share with us about what Ellice is
Sure.
dealing with, or how she feels when she has the opportunity to go back home, and a realization that she comes to.
Yeah. So this is a passage from the book after Elise has gone through all sorts of wild and craziness going on within the company. And she returns back home to Chillicothe, the small rural town where she was raised. And it's not so much an epiphany, but it is kind of a realization as she looks around the town. Put on my glasses, pardon me. Um, and so this is her when she goes back to Chillicothe. I stopped the car in front of a single-story shotgun house near the end of Periwinkle Lane, the windows now boarded up with wood planks and painted over with fading hues of red and black graffiti. Looking at this house was like looking into the cracked mirror of my psyche. There weren't enough $2,000 dresses or Bernhardt linen office chairs in the world to erase where I came from. But driving through this town, I caught a glimpse of what I'd forgotten since entering the executive suite. I realized who I really was. I was a fighter. Black girls, big boned and thick skinned, fight all the time. We fight to be heard, to be recognized, to stay alive. We fight even when we don't know we're fighting. And now, despite all the labels society tried to place on me, I knew I wasn't an angry Black woman. I was a fighting Black woman. And I trained hard right here in this town.
I, I really love that, because that's the thing. We're seen as angry, and not
Mhm.
to say that we don't have the right to be angry.
Exactly. Who wouldn't be? We're the
We
most
do.
disrespected and maligned people on the planet. Why wouldn't we
Right.
be angry?
Right, exactly. There is a such thing as righteous indignation.
Exactly. Exactly.
And but just the fact that she realizes that she is a fighter and that she
Mhm.
is fighting for the things that are important to her, whether
Right.
it's regaining her sense of self or fighting for her family and the ones that she loves, and realizing that I felt that even though there are all of these secrets and all of these things, that there came a point where she said, you know what? I'm just going to have to step into my truth, walk
Hmm.
in my truth,
Exactly. That's
do what
exactly
it
what.
is that I need to do
Right.
to take care of business, but I have to be real and be true to myself.
Hmm. Exactly. That's exactly it. I think that sums up like who she is and kind of this journey that she goes on and where she comes to be at the end of all that she has gone through. Exactly.
And I really love that about the story. Of course, as in any story, there are things that you don't want to happen that do, and there are things that you're glad that they happen. Because there are people who did dirty things and they got what they deserved in the long run. So that part is really good, and I really, as I mentioned before, I really love the story. I really enjoyed the story, and I would recommend this book to anyone who is interested in reading, kind of first I call it a psychological thriller. So no, it's not really that. It's like a corporate espionage legal thriller.
Well, it's kind of a lot. It's kind of a mashup.
Right.
Although I try and tell people, despite the body count, it really is just a little book of,
Mm-hmm.
about family and love and loss, and a little
Mm-hmm.
murder and mayhem too.
Yeah,
Just, yeah, just a
just a
smidge.
little, just a teeny bit. But I mean, there are so many different things in the story we could talk about, but because we don't want to spoil, I'm not going to get into some of the things that are like, wow, wow, wow. But there is one person, let's see here, has a comment. So I'm not a big whodunit kind of reader, but this sounds good. Can't wait to read it. Congrats on the debut novel, Ms. Morris.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you.
Yes, and Anissa had another comment saying it hits on a lot of subjects. Anissa, you are correct. That's why I had to kind of narrow it down. There's so many different things that it talks about. But I'm just kind of segueing a little bit, Wanda. Of course, this is your first novel. So,
Mhm.
once again, we congratulate you on that. So, when we were speaking earlier, you were saying that you originally didn't necessarily set out to write a novel. Tell us a little bit about your writing
Well,
experience
what
process.
what I did, I've always wanted to write. I've always loved to write ever since I was a young girl. And I originally started out trying my hand at nonfiction. But I found it very difficult for me because telling kind of a personal story, it just seemed like it was hitting too close to home. It seemed too close to me. It seemed like I was kind of laying myself bare. Um, but this character of Ellice Littlejohn just kind of rattled around in my head for years. And as I've said in other contexts, I started this book back in 2008, like
Oh,
way
wow.
back. Um, and I wrote probably about 70 or 75% of the book, and then I put it away because
Mm,
I convinced myself no one was going to want to read a book about, a Black woman who was in her 40s who worked with these god awful people. It was just like,
mhm.
people read a book to escape, and, who wants to escape to this horrible world? But more importantly, I think I put it away because I didn't believe in my writing. I thought,
Mm,
my writing's not any good. I've got a job as a lawyer. Why am I trying to do this? So I put it away. And then about 6 years ago, I went through some health challenges. I got through them. But when I was on the other side, I kind of asked myself, what am I doing? Like, what do I do that gives me joy.
Mm,
Work in this really stressful job. I'm trying to be all things to all people. What am I doing for Wanda? And I realized that I always loved to write. And it felt like I was missing a piece of myself by not doing that. So I picked the manuscript back up. And, I read it and I was right. The writing was bad. It was really bad. The first draft it was, it was bad. Um, but this time I was okay with that because it was like, then that means that I can get better.
mhm,
So I started taking like online courses. I would take night courses right over here at Emory University. They had a
mhm.
creative writing course on Wednesday nights, and I would go over to that every Wednesday night. I, attended conferences. I did, at the time, I was doing a lot of travel for my job.
Okay.
And if I had to be in a city, I would look up and see if there was a conference or something going on or a workshop or something. And so that's how I could get in a lot of that. But I really did hone in on the craft so that I could learn about pacing and characterization. And then, finally, when the manuscript was in some decent shape, I started querying, got a ton of rejection, a ton
Mm.
of rejection. But 2 years ago, I went to a conference in New York City called Thriller Fest, and I pitched the book to a lovely woman named Laura Galvin with Aveda's Creative Management, and she signed me up and she
Oh, wow.
became my agent. And last year, we went out on submission, and 12 days later, we were in an auction for the book.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was, yeah, yeah.
That's
So, it's
exciting.
like a Cinderella story that took 13 years, but
But you know what? That's just wow. That's powerful to me. I talked to a lot of authors, as I stated, and several of them have similar stories. Everybody doesn't start out and sell
Mhm.
immediately. They may work other jobs. That there are a lot of things going on, but it's like if you know that you have something in you, to
Yeah,
keep going. And I love the fact that you said that you took classes and did things to get better, to perfect your craft, and all of that. And so if there are any budding writers out there, just take notes, pay attention to that, because there's things that you can always do better, or
yeah,
learn, or get more skill, because it may not even be that the idea isn't good, or whatever the case may
right,
be. It might just be that you don't know how to craft it in such a way
right,
that that others can really understand it and get into it and love it, and all those sorts of things. So
exactly,
I just think that
exactly.
that's important, and that's actually very encouraging.
Oh yeah, I tell people all the time, if you really, want to do this and you've been at it, keep at it. Don't give up because you never know how close you are. It just takes one yes, and it's out there. People are out there and they're craving what you create. So don't give up. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think of, person's popping in my head right now is Tabitha Brown. Kind of the same with
Mhm.
her. She's doing things for years and years and years, and nobody really
Right.
knows who she is or what she's doing. And, all it took was that one yes, or that one video that somebody saw. So it is
Exactly.
a thing of just knowing that if God has placed something within you, that you have a gift or a talent. And I'm talking to me right now too. If there's something in you, don't give up. Don't set it aside. Don't think that you can never achieve those things that you want to achieve. Don't ever think that it's too late. You know,
Right. Yeah.
because a lot of things is timing. Because probably 12 years ago or whenever you started this book, it may not have sold.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly right. And I tell people that too. I think too this cultural shift that we've made in this country has opened people up to a book like this that,
Mm,
even 5 years ago, I don't think that this book in fact, I know it wasn't. I heard from some agents who said, I can't do anything with this. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it is absolutely a product of, God's divine intervention, first and foremost, and perseverance and timing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing that I do love, as you said, there's this resurgence of, people listening to and picking up. And, I mentioned earlier before we came on that one of the things I do like to showcase different genres, because of course, our very first book that we did was a Terry McMillan book. And of
Mm,
course, a lot of people read Terry McMillan,
yep,
and have over the years, and that's why she is who she is. But the
love Terry
reality of it
McMillan.
is, yes, there are so many women, and this is all about Black women authors, Black women writers. We aren't just in one vein. We can
Yeah.
write, legal thrillers. We had Tanana Reeve Do, who does horror. We've
Uh-huh.
had people who do historical fiction. I mean, we do so many different things. We don't have to feel like we have to stay in a box. And it's good that we are beginning to get the recognition for the work. And and I'm
Mhm.
committed to sharing more of the people who are doing this work, to open and broaden our minds as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I am blessed too in that regard. I am working on my second book, which is not a legal thriller, surprisingly. And so I'm blessed that I have an editor and an agent who encourage that. Um, it you don't want to be pigeonholed if you have ideas and different things you want to do. I think go for it. Absolutely go for it. You, like you said, we're not a monolith.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other authors that we spoke to is Honore Jeffers, who's
Hmm.
been known as a poet for years and years and years.
Yes.
She's got that poetry thing on lock, but she just released her first book, her first novel. So yes, we don't have to be pigeonholed into one thing or thinking that you can't, expand. And just being willing to do the work and to learn. I love the fact that you said that, to learn, to grow, to get better at what it is that you do, and
Mhm.
and go from there. So I'm excited to hear that you've got some other things in the works. I know this book just came out last month, so you're still in the thick of promotion, correct?
Yes. Yes, I am. Yeah. It's been a whirlwind. I am loving every minute of it. I don't take a minute of it for granted. I really don't.
Absolutely.
It's been great.
Absolutely. Do you see, because people always ask, well, is it going to become a movie? Or I think when I was reading some of the reviews, somebody said it would be a good movie or a good TV show or anything like that in the works, or not yet?
From your lips to God's ear, Marcy.
Okay. Right. Because I mean, it is good.
Of course, me, I wrote it. I see, Ellice Littlejohn. I see, Jonathan Everett and Willow Somerville and all these characters in my head. You
Mhm.
know, they don't talk to me in my head. They were talking to each other, and I was just the conduit writing it all down. So, yeah, like I said, from your lips to God's ear.
Absolutely. Because I mean, we do need to see things that are more diverse, not
Mhm.
just in the things that we read, but even if it's on film, So I
Right.
really appreciate you coming to talk to me tonight, homegirl.
I can't
I mean,
believe
literally, like in the same, almost in the exact same neighborhood. So
that
that's
is
wild.
so
But
funny. The world is so small.
it definitely is. It definitely is. So to everyone who is joining us live, I really thank you for being here with us as we talk to Wanda. If you haven't had a chance to pick up her book yet, please go ahead and put that name up again in case you missed it. It's all her little, oops, went too quickly. All her little secrets. We're about to be on, actually, we're about to go on a hiatus for a few weeks. So if you need something to read over the holidays, you can go sit in the room and get away from the family. Not not kidding.
Just as
If
a
you
holiday gift.
Right, or as a gift, if you have a friend or a family member, someone who loves to read, definitely, share this book out and let people know about Wanda and her work because it's definitely worth reading. So, just as I mentioned, we are about to go on hiatus. So Wanda has the honor of being the last book that I will share for 2022. So we're ending it with a bang. Yes. Literally with a bang.
Literally. Literally.
But when we come back in January, one thing in the new year, by and large, with a few exceptions, we're going to go to every week. So my mom was like, girl, how are you going to read all them books? I'm like, well, I generally read a book a week anyway. So now I'll just read them and share them with you. So our first book also has secrets in the title. On January the 10th, we will have BC Ajapon, and I probably did not say that last name properly, the Teller of Secrets. She will be my guest on January the 10th. And just to let you know, the first couple of ones in the new year are going to be earlier in the day because this is an international author. So she will be joining us actually from Ghana. She will be joining us from Ghana. So that will be on January the 10th. And then on the 17th, which is Martin Luther King Day, we will be talking to Nikki May, whose book is Wahala. And she will be joining us from London. So the first two are international. So I will post up about that so you can be on the lookout. So read Wanda's book, and then there's a couple others that you can look at and be ready for the new year. So once again, thank you everyone for joining, whether you're joining us live or if you end up watching it later. We do appreciate you, wishing you the best of holidays and happy new year to you. And we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marcy, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, hang on for a second, Wanda. Have a good one. Bye-bye.